NBC5's Natalie Martinez joining us now to break down what happened in court today and what this means for the Trump campaign.
Stephan and Allison, 2 days of deliberations for the jury to find Trump guilty on all charges. Legal experts tell me tonight that is likely to have very little effect on voters. Everyone seems to have something to say tonight. The Manhattan DA reminding everyone that the only voice that matters is the voice of the jury. Former President Trump came out of the New York City courtroom defiant today.
This was a rigged, disgraceful trial. The real verdict is going to be November 5th by the people. I'm a very innocent man, and we'll keep fighting. We'll fight till the end, and we'll win, because our country's gone to hell. We don't have the same country anymore. We have a divided mess. This was a rigged decision right from day one, with a conflicted judge who should have never been allowed to try this case.
The jury of 7 men and 5 women found Trump guilty on all counts related to a hush money payment that his former attorney, Michael Cohen,
it's accountability. It's exactly what America needs.
Made to an adult film star, Stormy Daniels.
That the defendant, Donald J. Trump, is guilty of 34 counts of falsifying business records in the first degree to conceal a scheme to corrupt the 2016 election.
The New York City District Attorney confident in the work of the jury and his office.
Our job is to follow the facts and the law without fear or favor, and that's exactly what we did here.
For nearly 10 hours, the jury deliberated the fate of the former president, who was seen raising his fist outside Trump Tower today. He can still run for president. NBC legal experts explain that even if Trump gets sentenced to time behind bars, which isn't likely, he would probably be allowed to remain out of jail during his appeal. That could take months and translates to the ability to accept the Republican nomination for president in Milwaukee this July. Kent College professor Richard Kling.
There were too many counts, too many issues, and had they been deliberating more, they would not have come back so quickly.
He explains that the evidence in this historic case must have been overwhelming.
It would be very unlikely with that many counts for him to be found not guilty of all of them or guilty of all of them. He calls a judge corrupt in a trial that he just walked out of a courtroom being found guilty of 34 counts. That would never happen in front of any of the judges that I know in the Chicago area. They would have absolutely locked him up.
And sentencing is scheduled for July 11th. That's 4 days before the RNC. Now, Trump faces penalties from a fine to 4 years in prison per count. Mr. Trump says he will talk more about the verdict during a press conference tomorrow morning. Allison.
It's a lot of reaction coming in following this verdict, but still a lot of questions as well, especially with this all coming in the middle of election season. Joining us this morning, we have clinical professor of law at Northwestern University, Juliet Sorensen. Good morning, Professor. Thanks so much for being with us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So we know he's still eligible to run for president, but how do you see this impacting the election or swaying voters one way or another?
For the first time ever, we have the presumptive nominee of a political party who is also a former president of the United States, having already served 1 term, being convicted of a felony, actually 34 felonies. The extent to which that influences voters who are going to come out in November and choose the president of the United States, one can only speculate. The Trump campaign will have to spin this. Your audience heard what former President Trump said about it last night. He said the trial was rigged. I expect that will be the drum that he's going to continue to beat, in a common theme.
And we have been, getting reaction from some of his base, some of them already pointing to and indicating that this even firing them up and motivating them even more. As we just stated, sentencing happening just days before the Republican convention. The majority of legal voices that we have heard from reacting to this saying that they don't see any prison time coming from this sentencing date. How do you see this unfolding?
I'm sure that former President Trump will not be remanded to custody in July. I'm not sure at all that he won't be sentenced to some type of term of imprisonment. The judge could order him to report to prison at a later date, however, after that sentencing hearing. What is for sure is that if that sentencing hearing goes ahead as scheduled in July, that's 4 days before the Republican National Convention is scheduled to begin, and whatever sentence the judge imposes will be hanging over former President Trump's head then.
And the guilty verdict, we know, as this is all playing out, former President Trump also in the middle of 3 other legal cases. How do you see this impacting those?
It shouldn't impact at all. Each of those is in a different jurisdiction. It's a separate crime. And juries are instructed to consider only the evidence presented to them in the courtroom in that trial. So the hush money case that was brought by the Manhattan DA's office really should not influence the evidence that's presented to the juries in Florida, Washington, D.C., and Georgia.
And of course, we do expect to hear from former President Donald Trump later today. We'll be looking for that. Professor Sorensen, Northwestern University, thank you so much for being with us again today.
Now to Manhattan. Today, former President Donald Trump responded to his conviction on charges that he tried to cover up hush money payments. He called the trial unfair and said he plans to appeal. But what does this mean moving forward for Trump and the November presidential election? We did compile a list of trending questions online, and our Courtney Sisk went out to get some answers.
We will continue the fight. We're going to make America great again. Very simple.
Less than 1 day after former President Donald Trump was convicted of 34 felonies, he's already looking forward to the November 5th election. But now, with a felony track record, can he still run? The answer is yes. He can still accept the Republican nomination at the RNC in Milwaukee this summer and run for president. The only way he couldn't is if the Republican Party didn't want to nominate him, which is unlikely after hearing their responses.
We the people stand with Donald Trump.
In most states, felons lose their right to vote. Trump's primary residence is in Florida, and Florida law defers to voting rights in the state where a felon is convicted. In Trump's case, that's in New York, where only felons behind bars lose their right to vote. NBC legal experts say it's highly unlikely he will spend any time behind bars, meaning he would be allowed to cast a ballot for himself in November. But what about his other criminal cases? He has 2 federal ones to fight in D.C. and Florida for election interference and holding on to classified documents, and another in Georgia for election interference. Legal experts say it's unlikely any of them will reach a verdict before the election. The classified document case is postponed, and the D.C. case is in limbo, waiting for the Supreme Court to decide if Trump can claim immunity. The election interference case's next hearing in Georgia isn't until August. However, he will now have a felony history on his record as he fights the other cases.
A judge set his sentencing for July 11th. He faces up to 4 years in prison, but experts say due to the nonviolent nature of his felonies, he likely won't go to prison. Today at a news conference, Trump already said he plans to appeal, a process that could take months.
Courtney Sisk, thank you very much.